As we inch closer to November, presumptive nominees Joe Biden and Donald Trump are locked in a close election. And two key voting blocs could be the deciding factor on who becomes our next president. Biden has been pulling out all the stops in an effort to win over LGBTQ+ and Black voters. And it looks like it's paying off as new polling shows these voters are overwhelmingly favoring another Biden term. According to a recent GLAAD poll, 68% of LGBTQ voters prefer Biden compared to 15% for Donald Trump. And a New York Times Siena poll shows 69% of Black Americans support Biden, while Trump only has 16% of the vote. But even with these results, Black voter enthusiasm has declined since the 2020 election. The Black and LGBTQ+ communities played an important role in a winning coalition for Biden in 2020. But the big question this year is, can they help him win again? Joining me now, Kelley Robinson, president of the Human Rights Campaign, and Democratic pollster Terrence Woodbury, CEO and founding partner at HIT Strategies. Thank you both very much for coming to the Saturday show. Okay, let's just talk about this. These polls show a slight decrease in expected voter turnout in November. Are you seeing a similar trend? Is there a real concern? I'm going to start with the pollster first, but I'm coming to you on this, Kelley, too.
Look, I'm glad we started here because enthusiasm is an interesting metric. You know, it's one thing that pollsters use to predict turnout, to try and predict who we expect to vote. Well, the thing is, not all Black voters are voting enthusiastically. I was in focus groups recently, and I heard a Black voter tell me voting for him is like taking out the trash. He doesn't always do it enthusiastically, but if he doesn't do it, it starts to stink around here. And I think voters realize that stuff is starting to stink around here. And so I do believe that, 87% of Joe Biden voters said that 87% of Biden voters from 2020 say that they're going to vote for him again in this election. And so I do think that we are seeing that coalition begin to reassemble, but there is still work to do with younger Black voters and with Black men.
And Kelley, your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with you. Every 2 years, we have the same conversation. Are Black folks motivated to turn out? Every 2 years, right?
Yes.
And still, we always do. I mean, 2020, you had the largest turnout of Black voters since Obama's reelection. 2022, we showed out and stopped the red wave from happening. 2023, we showed out and stopped a number of anti-trans, anti-equality, anti-voting people from getting into office. We have proven ourselves to be a constituency and a bloc that delivers and votes for candidates that support us. So the question for me isn't about whether or not Black folks are motivated to vote. It's about what are these candidates doing between now and Election Day to show these voters that they have delivered for them.
And so then talk about the impact of not just Black voters and LGBTQ+ voters, but the two combined. Like us, Black LGBTQ+ voters. HRC says, Human Rights Campaign says that we're the linchpin in 2024. How?
It's true. We're going to be the deciding factor. Look, across this country, we have identified 62 million voters who prioritize LGBTQ+ issues when deciding who to vote for. 62 million. That's 4 times the number of total registered voters in the state of Florida alone. And 16 million of those voters are also Black. So when we think about the margins it's going to take to win, because we know that the path to get to 270 is really going to be determined by tens of thousands of voters in a handful of states. And we're talking about a voting bloc of 16 million Black LGBTQ+ folks that care about these issues. This can be a determining factor not only for the presidency, but for the outcome of the United States House and the Senate and so many local elections across the board.
You view it the same way, Terrence?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, Black LGBTQ voters overwhelmingly concentrate in this younger demographic, younger Black voters. And we've talked a lot, Jonathan, about the gender gap between Black voters, that Black men are showing up different than Black women. Well, that's a 4-point gap between Black men's support for Biden and Black women's support for Biden. But we haven't talked enough about the generation gap amongst Black voters, that younger Black voters are 40 points less likely to support Joe Biden than older Black voters. I always say I love Black seniors because we know they're going to vote and we know who they're going to vote for. Well, younger Black voters are emerging as a persuasion bloc, as not just a GOTV bloc, that we have to not only convince them to participate, but they have options in this election. There's not one state in America where there will only be 2 names on the ballot. And so while we see younger Black voters, about 10% of them considering Donald Trump, we also see about 10% of them considering third-party candidates. And so there is work to do to continue reassembling that Biden coalition, because that's where we've seen the erosion in his top line numbers.
Well, I have every hope that the two of you will ensure that folks better vote. That's all I have to say. Kelley Robinson, Terrence Woodbury, thank you both very much for coming to the Saturday Show.